Hello, everyone. Welcome to MVP Tech Bytes. Today we have Hamid. Hamid, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for your time in this session and watching actually this session. So my name is Hamid, and I'm currently working currently and in the nearly past 10 years working with Microsoft Cloud technologies, on-prem technologies, and now continuing my Azure journey. So also active in Microsoft MVP and Microsoft Learn. So doing community activities, and now today here with Pastor. And thanks for having me.
Great. Hamid, just wanted to ask a quick question. How many years have you been an MVP now for Microsoft?
Since December 2019. So
Okay,
my first award category was cloud and data center management. So then by the time my activities switched to Microsoft Azure, and thanks to MP Global Administrator team, so they changed my award category actually.
great. So let's move on to your slides and see what is the topic that you're planning to talk about today.
So this is actually following my recent blog post for Microsoft Learn, which is
Mm,
also shared by Microsoft Learn and also shared in socials like LinkedIn and Twitter. I guess then we will have the opportunity to share the links also afterwards to the blog itself. So the title actually comes from title of that blog that recently shared.
okay,
And so we will be exploring Microsoft Azure learning, training, certifications, and career path opportunities more in bit in detail, actually.
great. Sounds good. So, what is the reason that you actually chose this topic? Why did you choose it?
Of course. Yeah, as mentioned, like following also that blog post, again, we are going a little bit back. And beside the technical stuff, we always deal not just in MVP community, not in a day-to-day, daily basis things that we are working like in a full-time or as a freelancer. But this is also really important to have a dedicated path and designing that path and learning in a day-to-day basis, especially for those who are really interested with Microsoft cloud technologies, not just Microsoft Azure, but in this session, yeah, we specifically focus on Microsoft Azure, but it applies actually to different areas when you try to design your path, when you try to create new habits for learning and for having more progress actually in the career path. So
Mm,
this session is specifically I was getting messages and feedbacks in Microsoft Learning rooms and in social media. So in my recent sessions, actually in the past maybe 4 to 5 sessions, I'm always trying to. I mean, not just always trying to. So most of the sessions actually are related to designing the learning and career path and how we can have progress and how we can make it more dedicated actually and create
okay,
that habit actually for ourselves.
okay.
So yeah, with the first point, actually, this is who wants to start the journey and who is changing the role actually. So for
Mm,
instance, for someone who's professional, working for several years in the industry, especially with Microsoft Azure cloud services, and wants to switch a role because as we will be exploring more in detail in the next slide, so we will be talking about like role-based certifications, which is Microsoft thinks more about, and this is the actually the logic behind the learning. So for instance, I want to become from Azure architecture, Azure engineering role to I want to follow Azure data engineering, Azure
mm,
data science, and want to learn more about it. So this could be also helpful for those people who wants to switch the role. And
okay.
also importance of having a goal and a design path, as mentioned. Yeah, it is really maybe sometimes crucial also to have that path and thinking about it in a daily basis, and also creating that identity for ourselves and seeing that identity who we want to become in our path, and
Mm,
then starting the developing and finishing cycle process actually. So this is actually the reason why we are having this session.
sounds good. So let's move on to the next slide. I wanted to ask you. You mentioned like great some kind of a learning path. So what are these learning paths that you're mentioning?
The learning paths, continuing with Microsoft Learn.
Mm.
So always sharing it in sessions, or especially like booking sessions and on social media. So Microsoft Learn, it is perfect. So it is
Mm.
really a rich content center for everything that someone can find. It's not just starting the learning path or getting onto a training path, but also finding answers for the errors or troubleshooting cases that we have in a day-to-day basis, like
Okay.
for instance when we are working or learning. So yeah, making it our homepage, it actually will help us to in our journey. So since we decide to be in this path,
Okay.
so so the learning paths actually are part of Microsoft Learn that we are designing for ourselves in a role-based conditions. For instance, you are just designing a path
Mm.
specifically with your skill set, with your background, what you have studied, and from with how many years of experience you are trying to land on that learning path. So this is why Microsoft Learn actually helps with those learning paths. So and the reason for this, why we are talking about it, is to because with Microsoft Learn, actually, it is really easy when you land in there and trying to see the goal and aim on it.
Okay. So in some ways you've mentioned learning paths. So it's almost like my career path that I see. If I have, I want to be a programmer. I could be a developer for like not the front end, but the back end services. I could have a learning path. If I'm actually a mobile developer, I could have a learning path. If I have into machine learning, I could have a learning path, sort of thing. So each one is divided into different learning paths. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. We can call it like different learning paths or the role-based certifications, actually,
Mm.
which the logic actually works in there by Microsoft. So you switch the paths, you switch the roles, and
Okay.
you follow the role-based certifications. So starting and developing, learning, and putting the effort and the time, and doing the laboratories, and then taking the certifications. And this is what actually it makes us to achieve that role-based certificate.
Okay, great. Now I also see that there's a learning room. What are these learning rooms? Like I know the path, but it seems like there's a room for us to use in learning too.
Yeah, this is actually I wanted to call it launched recently, but almost
Okay.
launched recently by Microsoft Learn, and we had the opportunity to actually work together closely with Microsoft Learn and creating the so that idea from Microsoft Learn that is amazing. So we had the opportunity to gather all the learners and
Mm.
professionals, students, fresh graduates. So anyone who's really enthusiastic and motivated with Microsoft Cloud technologies to gather them into training rooms called learning rooms. So in there, learning experts and from all over the world who are working with different technology, with different Microsoft technology, actually, let's say.
Mm.
So every learning expert is leading a learning room. So
Oh, okay.
learning rooms are part of the Microsoft Tech community under Microsoft
Mm.
Learn, and with that, there is a page for learning rooms. So every learning room and the purpose and the language and the region is mentioned in there. And some
Mm.
of the learning rooms are global, actually supporting like globally with English language. So some of the learning rooms are in local language with specific focusing in technology areas in Microsoft Azure or with focusing on different Microsoft Cloud technologies.
Okay, sounds good. So you also mentioned a bit about the role based sort of thing. I wanted to deep dig down a little bit on the role base. Is role based more like if I want to take an Azure developer certificate or Azure cloud certificate, machine learning certificate? What are these role based certifications?
Exactly, like mixing those roles actually sometimes, and it is also sometimes getting confused by students or fresh graduates when they want to start their journey or learning path with Microsoft Azure. So each role designed, let's say, a learning path. Going a little bit back, what we mentioned earlier, actually in this session, since if you are coming from a developer background, but
Mm,
you didn't work with Microsoft Azure services and really interested in continuing the career and learning about Microsoft Azure. So this is really important to follow that role.
mm,
And so that role will be your learning path. So as a data engineer, as an infrastructure engineer or an architect, or as an AI engineer and data scientist. So each role will be leading to that certificate. After learning and having a dedicated plan and achieving that certificate, I'm always focusing mainly on fundamentals and basics. So always starting with fundamentals and basics of each
mm,
role actually. And after gaining the certification and having a great comprehension and understanding what is happening actually with that role or with that learning path, so then maybe it could be a good idea or logical to start with the second path or with the third path, but with having a good understanding of the previous path that we started and we finished, and we are keeping ourselves updated on a daily basis.
yeah, okay. So in some ways, we could customize the learning path, and we could also choose which path we finish, and then continue on. Let's say I did some developer, but now I want to go to a path of like machine learning. Now,
Absolutely.
one question that usually comes up is basically as a student or fresh grad or professional dealing with changing and learning paths, like what is career paths and stuff. What is the most thing that they could actually get from this paths?
So this comes actually with different reasons. So the reasons actually, so what we are feeling as a student, as a professional, including all of us. So I'm also sometimes in this situation. So thinking to continue, so because technology is growing every second. So every minute, every second, every day we wake up and we check updates. Oh, okay, there's news. So now the
Mm,
era of AI, and we need to adapt with it and learning more and more about it to keep ourselves up to date actually. So the most confusion thing could be its variety of services and technologies. So again, this is also coming, for instance, we just wake up and we see, oh, there is AI and it's growing every second, and
mm,
integrating with different cloud services, especially in this case with Microsoft Cloud services, and it is becoming a little bit confusing actually. So should I start with it? Should I let my current path? Should I put it away and let's start with AI, or let's learn about machine learning? Or let's
mm.
learn about, so this is going big actually in our minds.
Oh, okay.
And again, the second one is also a little bit connected to the first reason. So different role paths. And we will actually discuss a little bit also about the consistency of those learning paths in the next slides.
Mm,
This is also really important. So when we are starting with a role or a learning path, as we also talked in the previous slides, to stick with it and be consistent with it. Um, so yeah, the next topic would be certifications and achievement. So it is also really important, but it won't be also becoming a confusion for us, and not keeping our minds engaged from not doing our day-to-day learning path or continuing that path actually,
mm.
and also not thinking of let's finish the path and quickly become an expert, or let's finish that path and let quickly become an architect. I know in some cases it sounds beautiful, but
Mm.
putting the time and actually continuing it patiently and with loving the technology and doing many laboratories and touching the technology, it is really important. And by the time it's passing, each role is having a progress and succeeding with that role and getting the certification and having a great understanding of that technology would be clearing all those confusions and also the mind engaging stuff. And
Okay.
the last topic would be not changing the path quickly. So again, starting the path, being patient on that path, putting the time, putting the effort, finishing and rewarding ourselves with a 2 3 days of small vacation, and then starting a new one.
Okay.
Um, the The items actually in the right side is about, so okay, we've discovered the items in the left side. So what is the most of the stuff in the industry for the students, professional, fresh graduates that are keeping the minds engaged and like an obstacle, and they're getting confused about continuing the learning path. So in order to clear all those questions, it is really important to write down everything and create a plan for us. So where am I standing now? So what is my background? What I've studied? What did I work? Which technologies I work with? What's my passion? So what kind of technical courses did I take?
Mhm.
And what I'm doing now and what kind of courses I'm continuing. And then with that plan, then we will be able to start our short-term future plans and long-term future plans. And having all those plans and actually the framework and the checkbox, actually the checklist, checkboxes in the checklist would help us actually to become successful with the plan on the paper actually.
Okay. So, Hamid, but like, I mean, we were talking about paths. So, what is the important to have a dedicated learning path? Like, I mean, there's learning paths, but like, why is it important to have one that is dedicated?
Of course, in the next slide, we will actually check about the learner mindset and the grow mindset that we want to
Mm,
build in the long term, and why it is important. We'll be talking more in bit detail. But having a dedicated learning path and being consistent and following that motivation will help us actually in this path to learn on a daily basis, keep
mm,
ourselves updated. Because yeah, as mentioned, like in every day we start our day as a new day actually. So we realize there are thousands of updates from not just from Microsoft Azure in this case, not from Microsoft itself, but from other vendors all over the world. So this is really important to know what we are following, what we are
mm,
learning, what is
mm.
our motivation, and boost that motivation actually. So by understanding it, by loving it, and by touching it and keeping the hands dirty, which is actually a good definition that I always try to use it. So as a technical professional, who I mean in general, like
Mm.
professionals who actually working with technical resources on Microsoft Azure side. So it is like yeah, keeping the hands always dirty. So touching the technology and developing dev environments and creating test environments and creating different kind of laboratories
Mm.
and understanding it actually. So this is what actually it makes it having that dedicated learning plan beside our career path, because what we learn, what we create as a dedicated learning path will eventually also have a great effect in our career, because at
Mm.
the end we are going to add all those achievements in our CV, in our LinkedIn, maybe interested in a role and going to an interview, applying for a job role, and these are all which are gathering bite by bite, bit by bit, and at the end, the result will be shown in there.
Okay.
In this slide, it's also, as mentioned, the previous slides actually. So always, if you're starting with the path, always start with basics and fundamentals in Microsoft Learn actually. So
Okay.
all the customized path and creating your dedicated path. So from start. So this is really important to starting with fundamentals. So as mentioned again, as Azure is a role-based learning path, you can start with every role that you are interested depending on your background and expertise. And as a final note in this slide, learn in a daily basis.
So, Hamid, you mentioned something about growth mindset. So, how do you become like having a growth mindset? Why is it so important to learning in the journey of like Microsoft?
Of course, I remember that term that somehow came into my mind in some of the learning and career path sessions, like the CI/CD pipelines we call in technical terms, but here I
Mm.
call it continuous learn, continuous develop. So CLCD. So
Okay.
that case we create our a pipeline for ourselves to continuously learn and continuously develop ourselves by planning and imagining it, which will eventually boost our motivation. So, as mentioned in the first slide, it is really important to see that identity that we starting the learning path, we start the role and seeing the identity. So, for instance, I'm imagining becoming an architect for data technologies in Azure or with infrastructure technologies, or seeing myself as an AI expert or machine learning lead, which will eventually boost that path and boost that motivation for us.
Hmm.
For the next item, it is also really important to plan it, start the learning, and that's the time to start, just not just tomorrow and just starting now. Get certified and reward yourself. The learner mindset and the grow mindset actually comes from there. By continuously learning, we eventually realize that it is becoming a habit and we are a learning mindset. So every opportunity we find from over the internet in our phone, instead of using like social networks or maybe digging a little bit in Microsoft Learn or other third-party forums and communities, knowing about updates and knowing about different solutions, different learning paths, new technologies, and mixing them together eventually will trigger the grow mindset, because
Mhm.
then by that time with learner mindset we will start to grow. As much as we learn, as much as we having progress in our career, we are growing, like creating the plan and learning every day, every week, small portion. So this, if like for instance dealing with creating the habit, so that will actually help. So just getting better, like a percent. I just read in a book actually. So getting 1% in a day or in a week actually eventually will have a really great effect at the end.
Mhm.
And as mentioned, yeah, creating the small opportunities for learning, like homepage, using applications, learning applications like LinkedIn Learning or again Microsoft Learn, following news feeds like from technology news feeds, and following tech page like Microsoft Tech Community, joining the learning rooms, and consuming the actually the material in there. For the final in this slide, so building the learning system and enjoying it. So building all the process which we went through in this session actually, it is part of the learning system. So we build a process, we build a system, and we love the system, and we want to understand it bit by bit and trying to enjoy it, which will
Mhm.
eventually again boost our motivation. Setting long-term plans beside the system. So not just, I mean, getting the achievement is it's good, but also following the system is really important. So we are just putting ourselves in the system and by itself. Again, put the time aside and no rush, which is really
Mhm.
important. So just learning patiently and following certifications and rewarding ourselves.
Sounds good. Now, I have a question about continuous learn and continuous develop. So,
Of
what
course.
happens if the build fails? Like in continuous integration, the build fails. So here, it's almost like the build is your learning, basically. Sometimes what happens is like we go on holidays and we come back, we're out of the habit, sort of thing. So I mean, having a growth mindset is great. But the techniques, I guess, it's the same that you have to re-achieve again. So if the build fails, you have to look at what was the era that actually built didn't go right. It's the same as the learning, as in like if you're off the wagon sort of thing, you were learning a learning path and you dropped it. I think you need to go back and fix it and then continue on with all these techniques. What do you
Of
think?
course, this is really important. I mean, as in technical, virtually, in technically, like with the pipelines that it fails sometimes. So this is also normal that we also get failed within the pipeline we create ourselves as the learning path or within our career path actually. So the failing point could be like suddenly we feel tired of learning. So we say
Mm,
I'm not getting any results, and again this is also triggered by the rush, because we realize after several weeks, after 1 month, we are not getting the result, despite
mm,
maybe the result will happen just after 1 hour. Just it is really important to be consistent on that path. So
true.
the rush is always in there, so we need to deal with it, we need to get used for it. So there are many tools that we can use, and
Mm,
we just need to, when we feel that fail, the error in our pipeline, just need to calm down and start thinking about it. So what happened? Writing down, and no rush again, and it's going back a little bit. If we didn't understand what's happening with that technology and what's happening with that learning pad actually, because as much as we understand the technology, it is becoming more sweet, and we love it actually more in that way. So, for
Mm,
instance, it has also happened to me. For instance, when you've been reading about something, and sometimes it's happening, we don't understand one line and how the technology works, and we just want to move faster. For instance, because of some deadlines and projects, we just need to know what is happening at the end with that technology. And at
mm,
some point, we understand, okay, no, that's not working, and this is the failure actually happens in that point. So maybe it will be also helpful going a little bit back, starting to learning again about what we've started and thinking about that learning path. And again, seeing the identity, because with seeing the identity, we will know that at the end, we will hold the certificate and we will hold that opportunity for ourselves to work work with that role actually, work with
yeah.
that technology. And this is actually what could save us from those failures.
Exactly. I also agree to the fact that I know that there's no rush, but having certain timeline that you're going to complete it always pushes you to actually complete that too. It is no rush, but like I mean, you should think about okay, in 2 months' time, I'm going to finish this learning path, and at the end of 2 months part, I might apply for a certification. Like this is the certification date that I'm going to do an exam or something like that. I think that actually helps out in making your goal too.
Absolutely, I agree with it. Yes,
Yeah.
it's really crucial also to having that plan, like 1 month to 2 months to 3 months, and then we will see the result actually. So this is really a great motivation and it's a great boost actually.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it. So I wanted to ask you, what are the call for actions for our audience today?
So I believe that we will have the opportunity to share the connecting points actually with the socials. I want to share the Microsoft Learning Rooms link actually.
Mm,
So if anyone interested, because I'm not just me and also learning experts, we are always online in there for starting from actually scratch, like talking where should I start, what are the plans. So talking about technical stuff and about troubleshooting steps, about errors. So we have different channels in Microsoft Teams, and with each technology and each category actually. So I would like
mm.
to invite for the Microsoft Learning Rooms to joining there and connecting in LinkedIn, Twitter, and yeah, I'll be always available for any questions.
Great. Thank you. So I'll share all of those in the show notes. I guess for anybody starting, they should first visit learn.microsoft.com and then go through join a learning room. And then if you have any questions, you could always write in there. And then you never know, Hamid might be answering it.
Of course, yeah. I will be sharing actually the direct joining link to the Microsoft Learning Room, so maybe that would be saving a little bit time for the learners.
Sure. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Hamid. I learned quite a lot about Microsoft Learn and learning rooms and all these other technologies that actually provide you to role-based certificates and things like that. Thank you so much, Hamid.
Amazing. Thank you for your time and having me. That was a great opportunity.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.